Svita, the music guide.
Let's learn.
Svita, the music guide.
Music rocks.
Hey kids, welcome to my show. I'm Svita, the music guide, and today we'll be visiting 4 different eras with the history of music. Today I'll be talking about 4 composers who've influenced each other and us with their musical compositions. So now, let's go a long way back in time and start off in the Renaissance era. The Renaissance era. The Renaissance era started in 1400s and ended in the 1600s. This is the time when the printing press was invented. The invention created in 1451 not only had many effects on society, but also in music in the era. Not only was the printing press a form of sharing our knowledge with others worldwide, but it also had affected the life of composers like Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina. The printing press of music created a direct connection between this composer and their performances. Prior to this invention, Giovanni only used manuscripts to perform music, which are very messy and handwritten. I can tell you, if we were to look at those sheets, we would not understand them. However, the printing press offered a neat form of keeping records of his phenomenal compositions for others to view as well. Giovanni Palestrina. He was born in 1521 and died in 1594. He was a well-known Italian composer in the Renaissance era who composed sacred music. He is famous for his 6-voice part Mass called Missa si Nomen. Now let's take a look at that composition. This exact composition was the song that influenced a composer in the next era, the Baroque era. J.S. Bach, also known as Johann Sebastian Bach, found this song very influential in the making of his own Mass in B minor. Now let's take a listen to this song that he created. Now that we've heard 2 songs, one from the Renaissance era and one from the era after it, we now know who influenced who to make what song. This now brings us to our next era, the Baroque era. This era started in the 1600s and ended in 1750. This was the era of when the telescope was discovered. The first ever telescope, created in 1608, was called the Dutch perspective glass, and this invention had numerous impacts not only on the Baroque time period and the lifestyle, but also had a musical aspect too. The telescope was not only used as a method for scientific discoveries, but there are also a few phrases used in the time which related the use of a telescope to musical composers. An example of its effect would be on J.S. Bach, also known as Johann Sebastian Bach. In the saying, just as the motion of the stars does not depend on any telescope, the art of fugu is not bound to any particular instrument. Although this is just a comparison with the invention, the telescope also influenced him to make compositions that related to the universe and discoveries. Johann Sebastian Bach was a famous German composer who lived from 1608 to 1750. He is remembered for composing a composition called Well-Tempered Clavier for a solo keyboard. Now let's take a listen to this composition. This composition is a collection of 2 series of preludes and fugues in all 24 major and minor keys. This song had influenced a composer from the classical era. Whenever someone mentions classical, the first thing we think of is Beethoven, and that's correct. Beethoven often played the preludes and fugues of Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. Also, did you know that Beethoven called Bach the original father of harmony? Well, he did. Beethoven found this song very impressive, which influenced the making of his late piano sonata number 32 in C minor. Now let's take a listen to that song. The Classical Era. The Classical Era began in 1750 and ended in 1820. This era marked the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution began in 1760. And led to numerous developments concerning the economy, like child labor, urbanization, public health, income, and working standards. But that we all know. What some of us don't know about this event is that there are numerous aspects of this Industrial Revolution that affected music and the composers of the time period. Did you know that some people believe that Beethoven had started the movement in music as he bridged the gap between classical and romantic periods with his Third Symphony as an example of heroism? But people believe a lot of things, like how one day Trump is going to do something good. But going back to Beethoven, he straddled the evolution of the classical style into the Romantic era. His life points up another aspect of development in music at the time, the age of the Industrial Revolution. Beethoven is a famous German composer and pianist who was a crucial figure in the transition between the classical and Romantic eras with Western art music. A composition Beethoven is commonly known for is Beethoven's Symphony No. 5. Now let's listen to that composition. Written in C minor, this composition is one of the most famous songs of the classical era. This song had also influenced a composer from the Romantic era. Beethoven was an interesting composer, as he influenced a lot of musicians to compose, but at the same time, he also intimidated a few composers like Brahms, who couldn't write a single symphony while Beethoven's shadow was still in the room. However, this song had eventually inspired him to put a chorus in Johann's First Symphony, which obviously would be called Symphony No. 1. Now let's listen to this composition before visiting the final era. The Romantic era. This era started in 1820 and ended in the 1900s. In the late 1800s was when the first modern upright piano and grand piano first appeared. Although the first ever piano was invented in the 1700s, which is not in this era, its functions and mechanics had developed over the century, in which the grand piano and the modern upright piano came around in the late 1800s. Johann Brahms. He was a composer of this era. He lived from 1833 to 1897, and he is a well-known German composer and pianist in this time. Since he's a famous pianist, the development of the piano has significantly impacted him and his music. It had influenced the form in numerous famous symphonies and choral compositions. Symphony No. 1, which obviously is his first symphony, was created in 1854. However, that was not his most famous work. His most famous work was the Violin Concerto in D major, which he composed in 1878 and dedicated to his friend, the violinist Joseph. This song had not only influenced numerous composers in the following eras, but also influences our music today, just like all the other compositions we've heard. But I hope you guys learned a lot about the history of music and who really composed each composition. But till next time, this is Savita the Music Guide signing out.